Try this out.
Brazil is one of the world's largest countries, but when it was first settled by Europeans, it was agreed that its borders would only look like this. So how was the end result so?
This we figured out in the last video. So this all, and the funny part, you know what it is? That probably just this part right here, if we go and check it out, it's probably as big as like Germany almost or something, or even bigger. So that would have been already a massive gain for Portugal, honestly.
Different. How did Brazil come to be so big? So when Christopher Columbus returned from the New World, he arrived in Lisbon. Given that he'd previously asked the Portuguese to fund his voyage, they knew his return meant that he found a route to Asia.
Let's go!
Obviously this was a new continent, but nobody knew at the time, and so the Portuguese prepared an armada to go there and take some land. The Spanish were worried about this, and so they did the only thing that they could. They told on Portugal to the Pope. He didn't want Portugal and Spain to go to war, and so he divided the world between them at this line, which gave Portugal this tiny sliver of land in the Americas. And the next year in 1494, the two renegotiated and Portugal's claim
it's a little bit like half of Italy, that's alright.
Grew to this. Portugal kept within these bounds and both powers got...
That's massive though. This is massive. This is a massive amount of land. It is a huge country it will be.
This. Portugal kept within these bounds and both powers got along in the region. That was until 1580 when a succession crisis at home led to Portugal's throne being taken by the King of Spain. Both countries now having the same ruler meant that any territorial squabbles were mostly irrelevant. As such, there was no need to change anything. That was until change was forced upon Brazil when the Dutch turned up in the early 17th century.
The Dutch!
As you'll know, the Dutch at this point were revolting against the Spanish. Previously, the Portuguese were more than happy to let the Dutch trade with Brazil. But after fighting between the Netherlands and Spain kicked off again, the king barred them. The Dutch refused to accept this and so just sailed to Brazil and took this land and named it New Holland. This wouldn't last for too long, and shortly after Portugal regained its independence, it took Brazil back. Eventually, the Portuguese wanted more from Brazil and so decided to explore to the west so they could find either gold or slaves. This desire for riches led to some expansion to the west as well as to the south. Shockingly, Spain wasn't happy with this, and so in 1750 the two sat down and renegotiated their
Man, that's amazing that it's not that long ago. And really it's baffling when you think about it that, you know, you give for granted, you know, the way things are today, or sometimes you think of history as a long time ago, and this is 1750. It's crazy. Like, there's probably mostly just nothing there, or some tribes or whatever. So it'll be very interesting to see if there's any census, but it's impossible to figure out how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of locals, let's say, they lived in those areas in South America. I don't think many. And it's fascinating to see that this just happened yesterday, basically, in terms of like, you know, like how old is the planet, you know?
Previous agreement. It was decided that Portugal would be entitled to take all of this, which was a massive increase, but at the cost of giving this to Spain. This may seem like a bad deal for Spain, but they agreed to it for two reasons. Reason one was that this land was mostly rainforest and so hard to use, and thus Spain didn't value it. And reason two was that this area was used as an avenue of smuggling goods in and out of the Spanish Empire. Now, both Spain and Portugal had a rough time during the Napoleonic Wars, with Spain becoming irreversibly weakened and the Portuguese royal family taking up residence in Brazil. As Spain's grip on the New World faltered, this region broke away with the intent of establishing an independent republic. The Portuguese used this lack of monarchy as a pretext to invade, and they soon took all of this in 1817. The soon independent Brazil wouldn't keep it for long though, since the British wanted to promote good relations with Buenos Aires, who claimed the land as their own. Fearing that a war would affect their trade, or worse, make them have to do something, it was agreed in 1828 that this land would become the independent state of Uruguay. And Brazil...
Wow, so that's literally became Uruguay in 1828. That's crazy, man. It's like you never think so much of those countries there, amazingly. And sometimes I have to remind myself that Uruguay or Paraguay exist, which they're a pretty big country. And, you know, if you compare them to Europe, it's probably as big as Portugal or even bigger. Maybe I'm wrong. So it's fascinating to see all this passage of hands that happened in between the Spanish and the Portuguese at the time and the Europeans. So, and of course, I think in this same period that this was happening, probably there was also a massive, let's say, slave trade that took place from Africa to Brazil, because it's actually, I learned that, in fact, the majority of the trade, of the slave trade, actually took place in South America. In North America, the number was very small comparatively. Like, 300,000 or a little bit more to the North Americas, but much more in Brazil. So people tend to forget that.
State of Uruguay, and Brazil formalised the rest of its western and northern borders with its neighbours over the 19th century. The last remaining issue was this land here, which was claimed by both Brazil and France, but neither had done much to enforce it. As such, in 1895, French troops invaded but were soon repulsed. And to prevent a major war, the issue went to international arbitration, which sided with Brazil. And that was the last major potential border change to the country, and it's how Brazil got to be the size that it is today.
So that basically, thanks to international arbitration, that managed to basically, like the Portuguese, they moved in Brazil, they managed to stay Brazilian. And therefore also the language itself, because feels like that could have been very easily been converted to Spanish, which the rest of basically from Mexico down speak. So let's like this nice video from History Matters. That was very nice, and I learned a lot of stuff actually.